Hey guys, welcome to Rosie's Dessert Spot. Today we'll be creating this fondant wood grain box cake. I absolutely suck at creating square cakes. So what I like to do is either grab 2 square cake boards, the size that I want my cake to be, or acrylic discs like mine here, work really well. This is a freezer bag. I have just taped it really tightly across all 4 sides and then cutting off the excess on the corners. This is basically going to help us shape our square cake to be so very neat and with very sharp edges. The acrylic discs that I have used here are 1/4 inch thicker than the actual cake, so 8 1/4, whereas my actual square cake is 8 inches. Cut your cake as you normally would. I'm only going to be using 1 cake cut in half. If you wanted to, you can cut it in 3 or 4 sections so you have a bit more frosting. But this was a butterscotch mud cake, so it was really rich on its own. This is white chocolate ganache that I'm using. You don't have to use white chocolate ganache. You can use dark chocolate ganache or even buttercream. Will work really nicely for this project as well with the molds. Cover the plate completely in about 1/4 inch thickness of ganache. Place your cake over the top, fill it in as you normally would, and then place the second half on top. I like to use the baked side of the cake facing up so it's nice and flat and won't crumb. Press down firmly when you're happy with the position and then crumb coat as usual. I'll have the recipe in the description box and in the cards for you to know how to make ganache yourself at home. Create a crumb coat as you normally would and then clean up the edges. Before you put it into the fridge, you're going to place some more of that white chocolate ganache onto the second plate and then stick it to the top of your cake. Use 2 scrapers pressed up against each other to make sure that it's perfectly centered and aligned, and then press it down firmly on your cake before popping it into the fridge for a good half hour. When it's nice and set, you can feed into those spaces your white chocolate ganache. Mine was super duper runny and I liked it that way. That way it got into the crevices and it gave me a lot more time to work with it. I applied it in there, scraped off the edge, continue to apply in spaces, scrape off and repeat until you have a little something like this. Pop it into the fridge for a good hour to set completely and then cut away that freezer paper that you have up top. I removed this section in the very middle, peeled out the corners so I can take out the plate, and then gently peeling towards the center of the cake so that you don't disturb the sharp edge. You want to clean that up and then stick it onto your cake board. So what we're working on is actually the bottom of the cake. To do this, you can release the cake from the board, add a little bit of ganache to help stick it over the top, and then flip it upside down. We have to now release the top disc just as we did before, and this will become the top of our cake, so be very gentle with how you remove the freezer bag. Let it set in the fridge in the meantime while you work with your fondant. This is brown fondant and I'm using cornstarch to make sure that it doesn't stick to my bench. Roll it to about 4 millimeters in thickness, 3 or 4 will work, and then take a fondant sculpting tool and create a wood grain effect. Basically, I just like to create waves that overlap. In the little section where they sort of leave a larger area, I'll create tinier waves overlapping each other, and that's basically how I like to create my wood grain. Making sure that I press nice and firm. I want that texture to be nice and deeply indented into the fondant. That's why you want to leave it a little bit more on the thicker side so you have the room to do so without the fondant ripping. I took some string and I measured it up against the cake so I knew exactly how large to cut it to cover the surface of the cake, plus about 1/4 inch overhang. Sometimes you might end up cutting not enough and it's really annoying because then you have to roll it out all over again, create the wood grain pattern all over again. You'd rather have a little extra than not enough. For the details on the side of the box, I'm just using circle cutters and a number 10 circle piping tip, literally just poking holes, letting the little circles build up inside, and then pulling them apart. Because we'll be using these a lot later and we want them to remain flexible, I am going to wrap them up in Glad Wrap so that it doesn't dry out. I let the panels sit on the bench for a good 20 to 25 minutes so that they would become a little bit more solid and lose flexibility. Just makes it a lot easier to cut and handle. And I'm sticking it to the cake with a little bit of water. The harder you allow your fondant panels to become, so the longer time you leave them to dry, the easier they'll be to cut without bending and kind of misshapen. Use a very sharp use a very sharp knife, and then use the edge of the cake to help guide your knife as well, so you know it's going to cut nice and straight. Once all your panels have been stuck to your cake, grab an airbrush, and with the airbrush about 7 to 10 centimeters away from the cake, at half power, I am just creating a darker indent into the notch of the knots of the wood grain, focusing on the little knots, and then creating lines. At the end, I like to do a quick brush over the whole section. That way it's a little bit more blended, so just circular motions to help color the whole thing. Do the same for the side panels. And then while the cake is still nice and moist, you can grab those circles that we had from before, place it centered on each corner, and then shape it around the edges. I used half circles for the very base of the cake, just shaping it around as well. And then you can paint this whatever color you like. I later on changed it to black just to make it a little bit more visible. And then those tiny circles act as like the little nails in the box. And you can paint those gold or silver with some edible luster dust and alcohol or lemon juice if you can't use alcohol. White vinegar works well here as well. Basically, it's anything acidic or alcoholic that will evaporate fast, unlike water, which will probably break down your fondant. And that's it. You can decorate it as you like. I decorated it with the Magic the Gathering logo, but for copyright reasons, I did not include that in this video. You could add like a birthday message on the very top, or fragile or something to that effect. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this cake decorating design. If you do recreate it, I would love to see it. #Rosie'sDessertSpot so I can check it out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.